Introduction. So the basic concept is that when we're generating data is because we're either creating elements in a family or we're creating data because there's processes running and those processes are building up our data. So if we have processes, we have data. If we have data, we can start to analyze it. The only thing we need to do is know which is the best option in order to analyze our data and which are the different tools we have. So basically, the information analysis is based on the entity's processes. In some cases, we may want data that is not required in normal process operations, but it would be quite interesting in order to monitor or analyze or improve the processes. So for this reason, sometimes we might want to create internal fields to store this additional data, like calculated data, segmented data, and things like that. So let's say I'm running my processes and maybe I don't really need to know the VAT or the tax. So in the process, I don't really use that data, but maybe internally for my data analytics, it would be interesting to know what the tax is. So maybe I have other values like the price, the cost, and other values that are being generated or data that's being stored that I am going to use in the processes. But then internally, I might want to add some internal fields to the panel in my process or to my data records and my families of records. And these additional data fields can store data that might be interesting for the data analysis. So sometimes when I want to create my reports, first I'll have to go to a process and add a calculated field or a segmented field or some field that can contain this additional data. This way later on I can monitor that data and investigate or get better or more consistent and accurate data. Now we all have a lot of data in our companies, but the interesting thing is to transform this data into useful information. So basically while my processes are running, they're going to be building a lot of data and all the data is going to be stored in the system. And we can later use these data repositories in order to analyze the information. So we're going to see that the platform allows you to create all kinds of reports based on the process data and also on the data of the families of records. So you already know how to obtain data manually or automatically. All we have to do is start running processes, start using the system tasks, or maybe inputting the data manually, like grabbing the data from an Excel file and storing it within a family of records, or maybe having someone manually input the data into the records. So now that we have the data, we want to display it in different ways. We have to decide how we're going to do that, and we're going to have to ask ourselves some questions. For example, who's this data for? In what context do we need it? How much data do we need? Do we need to interact with the data? And who needs the reports? And in how many ways can we display the data? So let's say I already know how many ways I can display the data. I already know that there's pie charts and bar charts, and there's other different ways in which I can display the data. It's very important to take into account who's going to be seeing this data and what they're going to do with it. For example, do they need to interact with it? Do they need to actually, well, maybe it's a very advanced user with a lot of skills, like high IT skills, or maybe he's a broker that wants to make investments online. So he might be able to work very comfortably with a very advanced dashboard with a lot of data, with a lot of reports. Or maybe the report is meant to be used by someone that doesn't have, maybe they're not so tech savvy, they don't have so many skills. So it would be better to create a more simple report with, I don't know, less details and things like that. Once we take this into account, we're going to choose one of all the different ways that we have, or maybe we might combine several different options in order to build a report. We've already seen some ways in which we can display the data. These would be some of them. We've already seen how to display data on divisions in forms. We've seen how to use my process status to see the status of a process based on control points. We've also seen how to create a list view for data. This is what we've seen in my tasks or in the families of records. We've also seen the card view, the month view, the week view, the day view. And now we're going to see some other options. For example, we're going to learn about chronometry, about control points, about the deep business intelligence, and so on. I'm not going to go into detail of this list, but I'm going to show that Basically, we're going to go over dashboard and business intelligence. We're going to learn how to use all of these different options. And later on, we're also going to talk a little bit about Universal Watcher and how to create announcements. And there's some other topics that we're not going to cover during this session, but we will cover them later throughout the course. For example, here we have content management. This is a very interesting option in order to display data from the content management family. And we have an entire block dedicated to this because it's very powerful and it allows you to display or create your own grids of data in a very different way than what we've seen until now. We'll also see some logs that are created in the system automatically. So when people log into the system and they log out, we're going to see some sessions logs and some other bits of information that are stored in the system, and we can check whenever we need this. We're also going to talk a little bit about performance. Not very much, because later on throughout the course we're going to talk more about performance, but here we're going to give you a glance of the different performance monitoring tools. So as I just said, the data can be displayed in all kinds of different ways. We've already learned how to use some of them, and we're going to start to learn how to use some other options like stacked columns, radar graphs, donut charts, and things like that.